Hi, this is Hristo and Emily, and you are listening to the MAPASGEN podcast.
We are so excited to get into this one today.
We really are, because this deep dive is, well, we're basically tearing down a huge illusion today.
Oh, absolutely. The illusion of the mirror.
Right, like we've all been completely conditioned to trust what we see on the outside.
Yeah, you look in the mirror, you see, the muscles, the clear skin, you have all this energy.
And you just automatically assume, oh, my internal machinery must be running perfectly.
Exactly. But the reality is, when you actually step into the world of reproductive biology and genetics, the mirror is, well, it's completely useless.
It's worse than useless, right? Because aesthetic fitness often acts as this, brilliant disguise.
Yes, it masks these deep underlying structural failures in your hormonal pathways and your genetic blueprints, too.
Which is wild. But before we get into the modern stuff, I am still so hung up on this ancient Egyptian grain test from our sources.
The Cahun papyrus.
Yes, the Cahun papyrus. So for anyone who hasn't heard of this, 3,500 years ago, if a woman in ancient Egypt thought she was pregnant, she would do this ritual.
She would pee on two separate bags of grain.
Right. One bag was filled with barley, and the other was filled with wheat.
And the logic was, if the barley sprouted first, she was having a boy. If the wheat sprouted, it was a girl.
But if neither bag sprouted at all, she wasn't pregnant.
Which just sounds like total Bronze Age magic, right?
It sounds completely made up. But then in the 1960s, these modern laboratory scientists actually tested this exact ritual.
And they were shocked.
They found out it was a highly accurate, biologically sound pregnancy test, like a 70% success rate.
Yeah, 70% accuracy for a medical diagnostic developed thousands of years before we even knew what a cell was.
It's mind-blowing. But I'm really stuck on the actual mechanism here.
How does human urine trigger a plant to grow?
Exactly. It feels like we're crossing a massive biological boundary there between humans and plants.
We totally are. And the bridge between those two kingdoms is actually estrogen.
Estrogen, okay.
Yeah. So during pregnancy, a woman's internal chemistry just undergoes this radical systemic overhaul.
Right. Everything changes.
Exactly. And the concentration of steroid hormones, specifically estrogens in her urine, becomes massively elevated.
So she's just excreting tons of it.
Right. And those scientists in the 60s who validated the papyrus, they isolated these compounds using chromatography.
Okay. And what did they find?
They discovered that human estrogen actually cross-reacts with plant hormone receptors.
Wait, seriously. So the plant is basically confusing human estrogen for its own growth hormone.
In a way, yeah. So plants use this class of hormones called brassinosteroids.
Brassinosteroids, got it.
Right, and they use those to regulate their growth, seed germination, cellular division, all of that.
Okay.
Well, human estrogen is structurally similar enough to those plant hormones that when it hits the dormant seeds in those bags of wheat and barley,
The plant receptors just grab onto it.
exactly, they bind to it. It literally acts as this incredibly potent, high-grade agricultural fertilizer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it triggers accelerated germination. The seeds wake up and they just sprout rapidly.
That is insane.
Yeah.
It completely answers the core pregnancy question. But what about the gender prediction part?
Right, the boy versus girl thing.
Yeah, did the wheat versus barley actually predict fetal sex?
That part was basically a biological coin toss.
Okay. So the 30% failure rate was mostly the gender part getting mixed up.
Exactly. The 1960s lab validation didn't find any statistically significant difference in which bag sprouted first based on whether it was a boy or a girl.
So they didn't get everything right.
No, but the foundational principle, detecting a massive internal physiological shift through a chemical change that stimulates botanical growth, that was an absolute direct hit.
They inadvertently discovered endocrinology.
They really did.
They mapped out the effects of an invisible chemical messenger millennia before the invention of the microscope.
It's brilliant human intuition.
But, think about the sheer power of that chemical. If a hormone is potent enough to literally grow crops in the desert.
It can't just be floating around randomly in the body.
Exactly. There has to be a highly regulated control system, some kind of command center.
And there is. The regulatory system is magnificent, but it does come with a fatal flaw based on its architecture.
Okay, let's get into this architecture.
We are talking about the HPG Axis. That stands for the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis.
HPG axis.
Right. It is the biological chain of command that dictates literally every single aspect of human fertility.
I want to really break this down because the mechanics here from our sources are just fascinating.
Let's do it.
So think of your body as this massive corporation. At the very top of the vertical power structure is the CEO.
Which is your hypothalamus.
Right, the hypothalamus.
Yeah.
But this CEO is locked deep inside a highly secure bunker in the exact center of your brain.
A bunker with no windows.
Exactly. You cannot look outside.
Yeah.
You can't see that you have a six-pack or that you just got a promotion or that, the sun is shining.
It's completely blind to the external world.
So how does it know what's going on?
It relies entirely on a continuous stream of chemical memos.
Like reports being slipped under the door of the bunker.
Exactly. Everything you experience, the nutritional density of your food, your sleep latency, the psychological stress of your morning commute.
It all gets translated.
Yes, translated into chemical couriers. For example, leptin comes from your fat cells. Cortisol comes from your adrenal glands.
And these couriers travel up to the hypothalamus and hand over a status report.
Right. And the CEO reads those reports.
But I'm guessing a CEO doesn't, micromanage the factory floor directly?
No, definitely not. Once it reads those memos and decides, okay, the environment is safe enough for reproduction, it delegates.
Okay, how does it delegate?
Through a highly specific hormone called GnRH, gonadotropin-releasing hormone.
GnRH.
Yeah. And the hypothalamus releases GnRH in these rhythmic pulsatile bursts.
Like a heartbeat.
Sort of, yeah. These pulses travel down this tiny specialized vascular network straight to the CEO's right-hand executive.
Which is?
The anterior pituitary gland. The pituitary is essentially the dispatcher.
Okay, so the dispatcher gets the order, and the dispatcher is the one who sends out the actual field commanders.
Exactly. And those field commanders are FSH and LH.
Let's ground those terms for a second because people hear them a lot, especially in fertility clinics, but they rarely get explained.
True.
So FSH is follicle-stimulating hormone, and LH is luteinizing hormone.
Right. And to really understand their names, you kind of have to look at their targets in the female body, which is where they were first identified.
Okay, so let's define a follicle.
A follicle is the small fluid-filled sac in the ovary that contains an immature egg.
Along with the cells that support it.
Right. So FSH, follicle-stimulating hormone, travels from the brain through the bloodstream to stimulate those specific sacs to grow and mature.
That makes sense. And what about LH?
LH is the trigger. It causes the mature follicle to burst, releasing the egg.
Which is ovulation.
Exactly. And then LH actually transforms the empty sac into a structure called the corpus luteum, which produces progesterone.
So the field commanders arrive at the factory and literally shout the orders, mature the product, release the product.
It's an incredibly elegant vertical power structure.
It really is. But going back to that vulnerability we mentioned earlier, it lies in the blindness of the CEO, right?
Absolutely.
Because this entire system evolved tens of thousands of years ago. The CEO's primary directive isn't making sure you have a baby.
No. Its primary directive is strictly survival.
Right. And building a new human life requires an astronomical amount of metabolic energy.
A huge amount. So if the chemical couriers bring down reports of, say, severe sleep deprivation or high cortisol from constant psychological stress.
Or a really steep calorie deficit because you were on some extreme diet to get ready for beach season.
Right. The CEO takes all that data and applies its ancient logic.
It basically reads those markers and concludes, oh, we are in the middle of a catastrophic famine.
Yes, we are under siege. There is a war in the city.
Because the CEO doesn't know you're just trying to look good in a swimsuit.
Exactly. The biological priority shifts instantly to survival.
So what happens to the factory?
The hypothalamus just stops the pulsatile release of GnRH.
It stops sending the memos.
Yep. And without those memos, the pituitary dispatcher just stands down.
So FSH and LH are never deployed into the bloodstream.
Never. And down at the level of the ovaries or the testicles, there is no pain. There's no flashing red warning light.
The factory just powers off in absolute silence.
In total silence.
I mean, think about your own day if you're listening to this. The endless notifications, the grind of hustle culture.
Running on 4 hours of sleep and an iced coffee.
Right. You might just be answering a slightly stressful email at a standing desk.
But your biological command center is operating under the assumption that you are literally fleeing a predator across a barren wasteland.
It's a profound mismatch between our environment and our evolutionary programming.
We have basically built a modern world that constantly artificially triggers our deepest biological fail-safes.
But so, what happens when we try to cheat the system?
What do you mean?
Like, If psychological stress and extreme dieting can silently shut down the factory by stopping the memos, what happens when people bypass the brain entirely? Like, they try to manipulate the factory directly to achieve that perfect physical aesthetic.
You're talking about the gym.
Yes. This brings us to a massive, deeply tragic paradox in male health that our sources highlighted.
The phenomenon known in reproductive endocrinology as sports sterility.
Right, sports sterility. We are talking about men who look like absolute Greek gods in the gym.
They have the vascularity, the hypertrophied muscles, the ultra-low body fat.
To society, they're the ultimate picture of health, virility, traditional masculinity.
But when you actually look at their spermograms...
Which is the clinical measurement of sperm count, motility, and morphology.
Right. When you look at those, you often find a complete biological desert.
0 living sperm cells. Absolutely none.
And the underlying cause of this structural failure is the trap of exogenous or external testosterone.
So taking steroids.
Exactly. And to understand why this happens, we have to look really closely at how those commanders, LH and FSH, operate in the male body.
Okay, let's trace the pathway. In a healthy male, the pituitary sends LH and FSH down to the testicles. Who are they talking to on the factory floor?
They target two very specific sets of cells.
Okay.
LH targets the Leydig cells, commanding them to produce testosterone locally.
Locally, meaning right there in the testes.
Right, and FSH targets the Sertoli cells. These act as like nerve cells, supporting the actual creation and maturation of sperm.
Spermatogenesis.
Exactly. But here is the critical detail. For spermatogenesis to occur, the concentration of testosterone inside the testicles has to be incredibly high.
How high?
Nearly 100 times higher than the testosterone circulating in the rest of the blood.
100 times?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I am stuck on the efficiency part of this feedback loop.
Okay.
If a man starts injecting external anabolic steroids to build massive muscles rapidly...
He is flooding his bloodstream with exogenous testosterone.
Right. So the CEO in the bunker reads the blood levels, sees they're through the roof, and shuts down the internal factory.
Because it thinks it's done its job perfectly.
But if the body is so smart, why doesn't it realize that the external testosterone isn't actually helping create sperm? Why is the CEO so easily fooled?
Because the hypothalamus evolved to monitor systemic balance, not local factory conditions. The CEO measures the hormone in the peripheral blood.
It can't see inside the testicles.
Exactly. When it sees astronomical levels of circulating testosterone, it applies the ultimate rule of biological efficiency.
Which is?
Why spend precious metabolic energy sending LH and FSH to run an internal manufacturing plant when the warehouse is clearly overflowing?
So the CEO permanently fires the field commander.
Yep. The hypothalamus cuts off GnRH.
Which means the pituitary stops releasing LH and FSH.
And the Leydig cells stop producing that highly concentrated local testosterone.
So the Sertoli nurse cells just lose all their stimulation.
The machinery required to build sperm doesn't just slow down, it actually undergoes apoptosis.
Programmed cell death.
Yes. The tissue literally begins to atrophy.
Wait, so by taking steroids to look like an ideal, strong father figure, they are literally tricking their own brain into shutting down the fatherhood factory.
Yes. They are degrading the cellular architecture required for reproduction.
They're trading their reproductive future for a temporary visual illusion.
And the worst part is you can't just, stop taking the injections and expect the factory to bounce back the next morning.
The damage is done.
The feedback loop is deeply entrenched. When the external testosterone is finally removed, the CEO in the bunker is super confused.
Because the circulating levels plummet.
Right, but the internal factory has been closed and rusting for years. It can take years of complex neuroendocrine therapy to rebuild that signaling pathway. And in some severe cases, the testicular atrophy is just permanent.
It is a devastating example of how manipulating one variable in the hormonal orchestra throws the entire symphony into complete chaos.
Absolutely.
But this also exposes a much larger misconception we hold as a society, doesn't it?
Oh, massively.
Because when we talk about male fertility, we fixate exclusively on testosterone.
Always. We treat it as the singular defining chemical of masculinity.
But true biological virility actually requires a hormone we've been conditioned to view as its exact opposite.
Yes. The strict binary that assigns testosterone to men and estrogen to women is a societal invention.
It's not a biological reality at all.
Not even close. Nature demands a highly precise balance of both in every human body.
Okay, let's look at the actual role of estrogen in the male body. because our sources made it clear it's not just some accessory hormone.
Not at all. It is entirely responsible for the final maturation and the functional capability of the sperm cell.
Okay, how does that work?
The mechanism happens through an enzyme called aromatase.
Aromatase?
Yeah, which is encoded by the CYP19A1 gene.
Okay.
Aromatase actively converts male androgens, like testosterone, into estrogens.
Right there in the male reproductive tissue?
Yeah, right there, specifically estradiol. So as sperm leave the testes, they travel through this coiled tube called the epididymis.
And what happens there?
Here, estrogen is vital for fluid reabsorption. Without it, the sperm remain diluted, and they basically fail to undergo the structural changes necessary to swim or even survive.
Oh, so here's where it gets really interesting with that rocket analogy.
Yes.
So think of the sperm cell as this high-tech rocket. Testosterone provides all the raw materials.
It builds the hull, it constructs the thrusters.
Right, it gives the rocket its physical propulsion system, and you can have millions of these rockets just sitting on the launch pad.
But if you lack estrogen, you have a massive problem.
Because estrogen provides the navigation system.
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that it matures the cellular receptors that allow the sperm to undergo capacitation.
Capacitation. That's a great word.
It's the final biochemical changes required to survive the acidic environment of the female reproductive tract.
So it's the shielding.
And more importantly, estrogen plays a role in preparing the sperm for the acrosome reaction.
Which is what?
It's the process of physically breaching the outer layer of the egg, the zona pellucida.
It's literally like spending a decade and $1 billion building an incredibly advanced spacecraft to go to Mars.
Right.
You get it onto the pad, the engines are roaring, the countdown hits 0.
And then you realize you forgot to install the GPS software.
And the docking protocols. The rocket just launches completely blindly into the void.
That's exactly it. A sperm cell without estrogenic maturation might look completely normal under a basic microscope.
Like, the physical X-ray looks flawless.
Yeah, it has the head, the midpiece, the tail. But functionally, it is blind.
It will never navigate to the target.
And it lacks the chemical keys to unlock the egg.
So a man lacking female hormones is entirely infertile.
Yes. Balance is everything. Nature does not respect human gender labels.
It proves that true health isn't about maximizing one socially celebrated metric. It's about deep, unseen integration.
And when we pivot to the female body, that concept of unseen integration becomes even more complex.
Because the management of resources is entirely different, right?
Very different. Male biology relies on continuous factory manufacturing, but female biology is governed by a system of finite inventory.
Ah, the ticking biological clock.
Exactly.
We hear that phrase constantly, usually weaponized in pop culture to pressure women about, careers versus motherhood.
Right.
But the clock isn't just a cultural metaphor. It is a literal, quantifiable metric flowing through the bloodstream.
It's an endocrine marker called AMH.
Anti-Mullerian hormone. Let's explain the biology behind the bank account metaphor we saw in the sources. Because the rules of this bank account are brutal.
They really are. So, a female fetus developing in the womb already possesses all the eggs she will ever have.
Millions of them.
Millions. But by birth, that number has already dropped. By puberty, it drops even further.
So this is the finite inventory, the safe.
Yes. These resting eggs reside within preantral and small antral follicles in the ovaries.
And the cells surrounding those eggs, the granulosa cells.
Yes, the granulosa cells secrete AMH into the bloodstream.
Which means AMH is effectively reading the remaining balance of the safe.
It is a direct, linear readout of the ovarian reserve.
So the more dormant eggs you have left, the more granulosa cells are present to secrete the hormone.
And the higher your circulating AMH will be.
But as the reserve naturally depletes with age,
the AMH level drops proportionally.
And here's the harsh reality in the bank account. You cannot make deposits.
No.
You cannot game the system. No amount of specialized diets, no high-intensity interval training, no antioxidant supplements or green juice cleanses can increase your AMH.
The decay rate of those follicles is an immutable biological countdown.
But understanding that number is incredibly empowering, though.
Oh, absolutely. It strips away all the ambiguity.
It gives you the actual timeline of your functional reproductive window, so you can make informed, strategic decisions.
Right, like egg freezing.
But wait, what if a woman actively tracks her AMH and she knows the bank account is healthy?
Okay.
The CEO in the bunker is sending the GnRH memos, the pituitary is releasing FSH, the factory is theoretically ready to go.
Right.
But she still cannot conceive.
Yeah.
There is a secondary system that can override all of this perfectly functioning machinery, right?
Yes. A highly sensitive safety fuse.
We are talking about the neuroendocrine pathway controlled by prolactin.
Prolactin, yes.
So normally prolactin has a very specific, beautiful day job.
It is secreted by lactotroph cells in the anterior pituitary, and its primary function is to stimulate milk production after a woman gives birth.
Breastfeeding.
Right. From an evolutionary standpoint, its presence acts as a massive signal to the body. We have an infant to sustain. All available metabolic resources must be directed to lactation.
Which makes perfect logical sense. While prolactin is high, it suppresses the HPG axis.
It inhibits the GnRH pulses, which prevents ovulation and blocks a new pregnancy while the mother is already nursing a vulnerable newborn.
It's a brilliant spacing mechanism.
It is.
But the evolutionary misfire happening today is that prolactin isn't only triggered by childbirth.
No, it is hypersensitive to stress.
Okay, how does that happen?
The mechanism here involves the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Which controls our stress response.
Exactly. Normally, prolactin is kept in check by a steady stream of dopamine released from the hypothalamus.
Like a brake pedal.
Yes, we call this dopaminergic tone. It acts as a constant brake on prolactin production.
But when a woman is living in a state of chronic, low-grade, modern panic,
Which is so common.
yeah, dealing with a toxic work environment or financial instability or just severe sleep deprivation,
Her cortisol levels spike.
and that chronic stress disrupts the dopamine pathways.
The dopaminergic tone drops, the brake is released, and the pituitary just floods the system with prolactin.
And the CEO's ancient programming only has two interpretations for this physiological state.
Right, it thinks, I am either actively nursing an infant and starving, or I am literally running from a predator.
And in both of those scenarios, getting pregnant would be a fatal mistake.
So the brain pulls the safety fuse, the high prolactin acts as an emergency lockdown on the factory.
The eggs are there, the machinery's intact, but the doors are barricaded.
Because the chemical cascade triggered by a missed deadline or a massive credit card bill?
It's biologically indistinguishable from being stalked by a tiger on the savannah.
Exactly. Both trigger the release of corticotropin-releasing hormone, both elevate prolactin, both shut down ovulation.
How many times a day does your brain's CEO think you're being chased by a tiger just because your phone pinged?
Probably dozens of times.
But unlike AMH, which is an unchangeable countdown, prolactin is a hypersensitive alarm, and you can turn off an alarm.
That is the crucial distinction.
Right.
If a blood panel reveals critically low AMH, that is a structural reality. You act immediately, maybe by pursuing IVS.
But if you test and find astronomically high prolactin due to stress-induced dopaminergic failure,
That is a functional roadblock. An endocrinologist can often just prescribe a dopamine agonist.
a medication that mimics dopamine,
Right, to reestablish the brake and restore ovulation in a matter of weeks.
while you simultaneously work to alter your environmental stressors, obviously.
Of course.
It's the difference between discovering a massive crack in the foundation of your house versus just needing to flip a tripped circuit breaker in the basement.
You have to look at the invisible data to know which problem you are actually solving.
Okay, but even if a woman actively manages her stress to keep prolactin down, and she freezes her eggs because she knows her AMH is low,
She's still only controlling the functional environment.
she hasn't addressed the foundational blueprints.
And that brings us to the ultimate blind spot.
Because what happens when the hormone levels are perfect? The structural ultrasound is flawless, but the very code of the machinery is corrupted.
This layer completely bypasses standard medical checks.
It really does. And to understand how terrifying this blind spot is, we have to look at a real-world case study from the European medical system regarding an anonymous sperm donor.
This raises an important question about our protocols, because it is one of the most sobering realities in reproductive genetics.
It's a horrible story.
So this man donated his sperm over a period of 17 years.
And during that tenure, he fathered 197 children across 14 different countries.
Right. Now, in regulated European systems, you cannot just walk in and donate for almost 2 decades without testing.
No, this man underwent rigorous, repetitive medical screening.
His blood work was immaculate. He passed every standard physical and biochemical evaluation.
He was the absolute picture of prime, robust genetic fitness.
But standard medicine was looking at the wrong map. This donor was a silent carrier of a mutation in the TP53 gene.
And TP53 is incredibly important. It's often referred to as the guardian of the genome.
Yes, it is a critical tumor suppressor gene.
Its job is to monitor cellular division and trigger apoptosis cell death if the DNA is damaged.
So when TP53 is mutated, it causes Li-Fraumeni syndrome.
which means the body loses its primary defense mechanism against runaway cellular division.
Individuals who inherit this syndrome have a near 100% lifetime risk of developing aggressive, diverse forms of oncology, often beginning in early childhood.
And the devastating reality is, of the 197 children this man fathered, 10 have already developed cancer.
And statistically, as these children age, that number will climb.
These families utilize donor services to bring life into the world, trusting the medical establishment's stamp of approval.
They only found out they were sitting on a genetic time bomb when their toddlers started getting sick with rare sarcomas and leukemias.
It's like inspecting the foundation of a house and declaring it completely safe without realizing 20% of the bricks used for the upper floors are literally made of explosives.
That's a terrifying analogy, but it's accurate. The profound question is, how did a man carrying a near-guaranteed cancer mutation pass almost 2 decades of medical blood screenings with completely clean results?
Because his blood was completely clean.
The answer is a biological phenomenon called germinal mosaicism.
This is where the biology gets incredibly dark.
Yeah. When we draw blood for a standard checkup, we are testing somatic cells.
Okay.
We operate on the assumption that the DNA in your white blood cells is identical to the DNA in every other cell in your body.
But germinal mosaicism violates that assumption.
It does. During the very early stages of embryonic development, when the donor himself was just a tiny cluster of cells in his mother's womb,
A spontaneous post-zygotic mutation occurred.
but the mutation didn't happen everywhere.
It isolated itself.
Right. It only occurred in the primordial germ cells, the specific lineage of cells destined to become his gonads.
So the rest of his body, his blood, his skin, his organs, continued to develop from normal, unmutated cells.
Exactly.
It's like downloading a perfectly clean operating system onto your computer, but there is a hidden line of corrupted code exclusively in the software driver that manages your Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
The computer boots up perfectly, the screen is bright, the internal antivirus scan reads 100% clean.
But the moment you try to connect to the outside world,
The moment you try to reproduce,
the system crashes.
unbelievable.
Deep inside his seminiferous tubules, where spermatogenesis takes place, that single mutated cell line proliferated.
So the mutation ultimately existed in only about 10 to 20% of his sperm cells.
The other 80% were completely fine.
But for the children conceived from that specific 20%, it is no longer a mosaicism.
No. The mutated sperm fuses with the egg, and the broken TP53 gene is replicated into the very first cell of the new embryo.
Those children inherit the catastrophic flaw in every single cell of their bodies.
It represents a massive, profound failure of reactive medicine.
Because the protocols assumed that a clear blood panel equated to a clean genetic blueprint.
They failed to account for the deep, isolated complexities of reproductive lineage.
And the financial and emotional toll is just staggering. I mean, treating complex pediatric oncology costs hundreds of thousands of euros a year.
But the psychological terror inflicted on the remaining families who are now just waiting for the genetic code to execute.
It's immeasurable.
Which brings us to the core thesis of this deep dive.
If we cannot trust the aesthetic mirror, if we cannot trust our circulating hormones,
And if we cannot even trust a standard blood test to guarantee the safety of our reproductive blueprints,
we have to fundamentally shift our approach.
we have to move to a preemptive paradigm.
Genetic awareness is the base.
Exactly. Expanded genetic carrier screening is no longer a luxury. It is a critical necessity before taking the first step toward parenthood.
You have to look deeper than a standard metabolic panel.
You have to actively search for the hidden mutations you might carry silently, or mutations that only become dangerous when combined with a partner's specific genetics.
It's like running a massive computerized system diagnostic on a car before taking a cross-country road trip through Death Valley. You plug into the internal computer and read the deep diagnostic codes. You do not wait until you are 500 miles from civilization with the engine actively smoking to find out you had a fatal oil leak the entire time.
Because knowing your risks in advance is not about living in fear of your biology.
Not at all.
It is about total freedom. It transforms invisible, terrifying threats into actionable data points.
If you know you carry a mutation, you use IVF and pre-implantation genetic testing to ensure the broken code stops with you.
If you know your AMH is low, you freeze your eggs.
If your prolactin is spiking, you fix the dopaminergic tone.
You stop being a passive victim of your own hidden chemistry.
You take control of the invisible.
So let's pull all of this together.
We started in Bronze Age Egypt, learning that the sheer chemical power of female estrogen is potent enough to literally trigger botanical growth in dormant seeds.
We descended into the neuroendocrine bunker to meet the blind CEO of the HPG Axis.
Realizing how completely vulnerable our pulsatile GnRH memos are to the false alarms of modern stress.
We exposed the tragic irony of the testosterone trap.
How men seeking the ultimate visual aesthetic of masculinity use exogenous steroids to permanently shut down their internal Sertoli and Leydig cells.
And we dismantled the hormone binary, proving that without the estrogen-driven navigation system, a sperm cell is just a blind rocket.
We confronted the brutal, immutable mathematics of the ovarian reserve through AMH.
And learned how to untangle the HPA stress axis from the Prolactin safety fuse.
And finally, we stared into the genetic void of germinal mosaicism, proving that a clean bill of health on a somatic blood test is absolutely no guarantee of a safe reproductive blueprint.
It requires a complete rewiring of how we perceive biological readiness.
So for you listening right now, recognize that your body is not a static monument.
As you sit here, your internal systems are running millions of silent calculations.
Adjusting your dopaminergic tone and your hormonal pulses based on your sleep latency, your diet, and the specific anxiety you're carrying at this exact moment.
You are the active architect of an invisible symphony.
And we hope this deep dive has given you the vocabulary to actually understand that music.
We want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on that clash between our ancient cellular programming and our modern environment.
Go for it.
Consider this. If our reproductive fail-safes evolved over millions of years to shut down our genetic factories strictly during catastrophic famines and literal predator attacks,
Right.
but those exact same neuroendocrine pathways are currently being triggered daily by glowing screens, late capitalism, and relentless social anxiety.
Yeah.
How many generations will it take for human DNA to finally evolve a way to tell the difference between a lethal physical threat and just a stressful email?
Until the CEO gets a window in the bunker, we have to rely on proactive genetic awareness to light the way. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the surface-level definition of health, and we will see you next time.